My name is Dr. Craig Treinen. I'm with Washburn University. I'm the Director of Jazz Studies and Applied Saxophone. I've been playing probably for about 35 years. I've been in the United States Air Force Band, played professionally with several big bands around the territory. I've played behind artists such as John Denver, Crystal Gale, the Temptations, and I've done the Ringling Brothers Circus gig. So whatever there is as far as music, I've done so throughout my lifetime. So born and raised here too.
Great.
So. I don't know if there was really a huge political climate at that time. I think we still were dealing a lot with segregation. I think everybody kind of understood that black musicians were not able to play on the same stage with white musicians, and so some of the perks, and white musicians were paid more than black musicians at that time as well. So as far as the political climate, I think you see a lot of musicians at that period in time experimenting with just the music itself, and I think as far as what they were trying to contribute to the black community was just trying to expose their music to more of a white culture and more of a, to a broader audience, trying to get people to understand the styles and it actually, you stop and think about it, a lot of during the swing period, even though there was a lot of white traveling bands, there was also several composers to come out of there, such as Duke Ellington and Count Basie, who still are recognized for the music of today. So, and you still see a lot of that music has influences of field hollers and call and response stuff and collective improvisation like you would hear in some of the early ragtime. So it's really kind of cool. So I don't know if it's so much a political thing, but just trying to find their way with their music a little bit. So. Well, you have Duke Ellington, you have a young Miles Davis, you have a young cat named Charlie Parker who was born in the, coming around, and you're in the swing period, guys like Cab Calloway and several others during this period. And a lot of these musicians like Ben Webster, Lester Young, and all these were strong influences on a lot of the younger kids that were coming up during that time. Miles Davis came from a very family whose father was a doctor. And Charlie Parker grew up and was married when he was 16. and then you've got guys like Lester Young and Ben Webster and Coleman Hawkins and some of the early Louis Armstrong and all these guys, they were going through changes during this time because after the Renaissance, even during the Renaissance period in like the late 30s, you start seeing all these young guys moving from swing to bebop. And so the swing period brought dancing to the youth of your age. When you were your age, that's what they listened to. That's what you see kids dancing to, was the big band swing era stuff. But then you start seeing these younger musicians such as Miles and Bird and Dizzy Gillespie and all these guys come in and they would learn. They were down late at night, like 2 a.m, and they get together at these after-hour clubs, and they go in there and have a ham sandwich and soup, and they would sit there and play till like 8 a.m. And they were working on a new style of music called bebop. And so that's how it kind of moved from one to the next. So there was a passing of the torch, you should say.
So were they so popular because they were playing this kind of new sound?
Actually, the bebop actually made jazz a little less popular.
Oh, really?
And the reason was because you couldn't dance to it. I mean, it was so much faster than the swing music. Swing music was made for dancing.
Oh, okay.
And so you'd have traveling bands and everything else. And so they'd travel and you'd play dances and proms and all this stuff with the swing style groups. But when you get to the bebop era, the music was much faster. The melodies were and the improvisation was much more fluid. So it was the musicians became more of an art, so people were coming there just to listen and not to dance. So, yeah.
Okay. So where would one go to see these popular musicians?
Well, 38th Street down in Harlem, There was several clubs: the Onyx Club, the Cotton Club. I mean, there was a row on a street that was nothing but clubs, and so you could go down there and you could check out all these guys. There wasn't TV as far as being able to check out and watch pop music like today and stuff like that. They had records back then, so if you wanted to listen to somebody, you had to buy a record.
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of times people didn't know who they were until they heard the music being sent from one place to the next. That was a great thing for them, though, when records started being produced, because their music was getting sent all over the country, and so people were able to hear them. And so, but like I said, it was the row there in Harlem, man, down there in New York, was that one street with the Onyx Club, the Cotton Club, and I'm sure you've heard of some of the other really, if you look at your history, there was like 7 or 8 clubs there that you could go to. I can tell you one thing. During that period, I think you have some of the finest musicians you'll ever hear. And guys like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon, Dizzy Gillespie have influenced any musician from that point on. Mm-hmm. And for anybody to say they haven't been influenced by one of those guys is lying to you. Because you have to realize they created a whole new style of music. From the swing era to bebop. Miles transcends several generations. Miles Davis, from the early 30s clear up to almost late 90s, he's transcended through several different generations of musicians. And students today still listen to those guys' recordings, especially Coltrane, Bird, and all of them. So they're very influential. And if you want to know how to play bebop, if you want to understand jazz, you need to know who those people are. Well, let's put it this way. Here in the States, it's funny because jazz is really one of our true American art forms. It's one of our only art forms that we could call our own. Mm-hmm. But it's not as popular as it is in the European countries.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think here in the States, we really don't appreciate art as much as we do, as Europeans do. Mm-hmm. And being an artist over in the European countries, you're kind of up on a higher pedestal than you are in the United States. Because I think still we have segregation and everything else. And when you go to Europe, color is not an issue. And even back in the late 50s and early 40s, color was not an issue over there. Mm-hmm. So I still think that had something to do with it. I also think the style of the music was not as popular to a lot of the culture as we thought it would be. Because I think once swing bands left and you started moving into the bebop period, you saw a real huge decline in people actually listening to jazz. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I almost think that we're more a society of having to have, I don't know how to say this, material or a materialistic type of society. Mm-hmm. To where I think Europeans are more of, or that type of culture over there are more of a philosophical and more appreciative of somebody's contributions to society. Like artwork and stuff like that. They have much more of a desire to see and do stuff like that. We're here. We're very much materialistic over here, and so I think that may have a sense. We wouldn't travel 300 miles to go listen to Miles Davis. You wouldn't see anybody do that. Now over in Europe, they would do that. Mm-hmm. Challenge. Yeah. As anybody as growing up as a musician, we all learn the tunes that we grow up with, right? Mm-hmm. Well, those were tunes that I had never grown up with. It was the first time for me to hear them was in middle school, and I'm hearing guys playing the style of music that none of my buddies were listening to. It was a whole new art form. Mm-hmm. And then I finally started studying and learning about it. And I found out how challenging it was to do what they do. and how difficult it was to learn how to do that. And once I got into it, I was hooked because I love the challenge. I love it being different every time you do it. It's never the same, and it's very creative. It's almost like you have one picture in front of you, and you have to come up with, you have to continue to paint it differently every time you see it. Yeah.
No.
I hate to say that.
Yeah.
I think and it's not. I don't think it's as much as the color of our skin, as much as it is greed. I think greed will keep us from being equal, and I think we're all of our various cultures are all guilty of it, but it may not be. It may not be a skin thing, but it's going to be social thing. Equality is a broad term. So what do you mean by equality? Do you mean women
everyone having the same, being able to have the same opportunities?
No. Racial things have changed, but really they haven't. They're just not as exposed as they have been in the past, but they're still there. And the other thing too, women's rights. Everybody says those have gotten better. Have they really? Like they should. American Indian. You look at the American Indian. They've given all these federal assistance to these guys and stuff. Have they really gotten better as a culture? No. Maybe kids like your age can maybe really change a lot what goes on in society. But I feel like my generation and before mine, personally, I don't think they're at this point are going to change much. But kids your age can change the way things look and do and sound and see and hear in society. But I still think the big culprit is greed. Money. Money is always the end thing to everything. And that's what's happening now, man.